entered the PM Entertainment Podcast.
Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of the PM Entertainment Podcast, the show that says to hell with logic, I'm going to slam my feet down onto this podcast accelerator and effortlessly jump other podcasts while multiple lesser podcasts explode behind me. The show that says one exploding helicopter is cute, but two exploding helicopters is cinema, and the show that will always go out of its way to celebrate, exalt, work hard for, and never put down the glorious work of those straight-to-video action impresarios, those troubadours of thrillers, those sultans of sleazy serial killer films, and the filmmaking powerhouse that were also responsible for a few Little Bigfoot films, Richard Pepin and Joseph Mehy, the P&M of PM Entertainment. Unlike ungrateful star Michael Madsen, who when interviewed about the starring roles he had in PM Entertainment films for my website aftermoviediner.com some years ago, said, those movies are terrible. He said, those movies are terrible. They're kind of exciting and fun to watch now, but at the time they were done, they were looked at rather unfavorably. I really feel like I got taken advantage of in that situation because I didn't really have good representation. I never have, and I didn't have a publicist. I was just trying to make a living, and PM Entertainment paid me a lot of money to do those movies. To be honest, that's why I did them. I wanted to be the hero, the lead guy, instead of the killer. It's just the scripts were terrible, and the guys who shot them didn't know what they were doing. Those movies are awful and embarrassing, but I did them. I've done a lot of films that are great, that made a lot of money for people, and I'm really proud of. And I've done a lot of films that I shouldn't have done. So let me just get this straight, Mike. The movies were terrible, but they're kind of exciting and fun to watch now. You got taken advantage of, yet you got paid a lot of money. And even though you got paid a lot of money, you're embarrassed by those movies. Instead of showing up like you wanted to be the hero, the lead guy, instead of the killer, PM Entertainment gave you that opportunity. And instead of, showing up, doing the work, being fantastic, hitting it out of the park, you just showed up, was lazy, mumbled your way through the film, and then years later, when asked about them, instead of finding something nice to say, you just ripped into them. All right, Mike, well, whatever. The check cashed. The movies are awesome, and you're wrong. Anyway, I am your host, John Cross. And don't forget, if you like the show, please remember to rate and review us on any of the podcasting platforms you use, share our Facebook and Instagram posts, like, comment, and you can contact us via our email, pmentpod@gmail.com. That's pmentpod@gmail.com. This week, as you probably guessed, we're tackling Executive Target, the 1997 PM movie that guarantees at least 2/3 of its runtime is action and that at least 1.5 of those 2/3 is car chases. Someone else do the math. Anyway, it's one of those PM classics where they stepped it up a notch from its starry cast to its larger-than-normal stunts and big sets. This movie, when on tiptoes, just about stands shoulder to shoulder with most things Hollywood had done up until that point. Directed by Joseph Mehy, written by Jacobson Hart and Dayton Cali, starring Michael Madsen, Roy Scheider, Keith David, Angie Everhart, Dayton Cali, Gareth Williams, Robert Miano. Again, I think Robert Miano has been in every single PM film we've covered so far. Matthias Hughes, and Lance the Gault. Lance the Gault, also no slouch, did multiple PM Entertainment movies along with Robert Miano. Fantastic to have them both in this movie. Cinematographer was Ken Blakey. The second unit director and stunt coordinator was Cole S. McKay. And the legendary Rick Owens was the Foley artist. It's a drive fast, shoot 'em up, kidnap the president, blow up 2 helicopters, put Keith David in a waistcoat and give him an underground Bond villain lair to swan about in type movie. And we are all the better for having watched it. Our guest this week is a screenwriter, a producer, an actor, a composer, also a fellow countryman, and all-round incredible talent. It's fellow countryman and screenwriter, producer, actor, composer, and talent, Tom Jolliffe. Sir, hello, welcome to the PM Entertainment Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's nice to have people covering these sorts of films.
Well, I hope so. That's my hope. My hope is that people who love these kind of movies are like, wow, finally. I hope there's someone somewhere. Really, what I hope is that there's someone somewhere who always wanted to do a PM Entertainment podcast, never got their act together, and now sees that I'm doing one and goes, damn it, beaten to it. That's what I really want. I want someone somewhere suffering. No, I don't really. I'm kidding. But you know what I mean. I'm doing a bit. So, Tom, were you always, this is our Q&A section of the show. This is where I reach deep within you and find the action fan within and find out all about you and your childhood and your life and your passion all in one survey, Q&A, whatever you want to call it. Tom, were you always into action films from an early age?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was kind of like the typical video store era kid. So it would be sort of a weekly event, just going down, picking out a video, VHS. And back in those days when you had sort of Drew Struzan covers and everything looked amazing, no matter how bad the film might have been.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was probably, when I was very young, I probably started on stuff like Star Wars, Indiana Jones. It was kind of Masters of the Universe that really kind of ignited a love of film with me. And
Oh, you've said the magic words right there,
Yeah.
Master of the Universe. It's such an underrated movie. I
It
think
is, yeah.
everyone expects it to be the He-Man cartoon. And as much as everyone, like everyone, I like the He-Man cartoon. It's fine. But the Master of the Universe as a movie marketed to kids, it's full of violence and gore and monsters and weird stuff.
Yeah.
The 80s were a joyous time. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. I'm just trying to say I too am a kindred Master of the Universe, Dolph Lundgren spirit. Anyway, back to you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, it is really underrated, I felt. I mean, because, the reason I watched it was the first film I can remember seeing at on the big screen as well. And I was absolutely obsessed with the cartoon. I had all the toys. And even for me, I mean, I should have been the fan that felt let down, but sort of 7 years old, it didn't matter to me that there was no Orko or no Cringer
Right.
or Battle Cat or anything like that. I was blown away by the movie. So yeah, that was a childhood favorite. And I suppose obviously Dolph kind of, I mean, it is an action movie, isn't it? So it's action, sci-fi,
Yeah. Action, fish out of water,
Yeah.
sci-fi, time travel.
yeah. And then obviously later on, Dolph became so synonymous with that genre. So yeah, everyone kind of growing up was sort of Sly or Arnold. I was kind of like a closet Dolph fan.
Yes.
And also the other guys as well I love. So I grew up watching a lot of those films, watching films like Die Hard, Terminator, Predator, when I was probably a little bit too young to watch them. Probably way too young, to be fair. So that was kind of it. And then it's just that other thing in that era with, VHS and everything like that, that I would be, you'd go to a friend's house, they'd have an older brother who had a VHS collection, and they're a bit older. So it's all stuff like Die Hard, Predator, but then it's also, they've got the kind of the next level, if you like, which is, Gary Daniels films, Don Wilson films, and obviously that kind of skews a little bit into PM as well.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, can you remember when you first came across a PM Entertainment film specifically?
Yeah, it was Executive Target, and obviously that was so not too far off from when Reservoir Dogs came out. That's when I kind of knew Michael Madsen from, and then he'd been in a few other films of that era as well, Species as well. Which by the time that came out and I saw that, I was about 14 or 15. So obviously I was obsessed with Species.
Yeah, of course.
I won't go into why, but yeah.
No. The momentary blip that
Yeah.
Natasha Henstridge had on teenage boys in the middle of the 90s, where, you could be like,
Yeah.
oh, she's in a Van Damme movie. Oh, there's a sequel to Species coming out. Like there was a moment there where everyone was all about Henstridge, and then that evaporated pretty quickly. But
Yeah.
there was some key titles, Maximum Risk and Species, that yes, we all remember enjoying. It's like Terry Hatcher. Terry Hatcher had her
Oh
moment.
yeah.
You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
definitely.
Terry
Yeah.
Hatcher had her moment. I'll never forget. Obviously PM. We've talked about Zero Tolerance on the show. Robert Patrick, big star. One of the straight to video movies Robert Patrick did around this time was Cool Surface. And I will never ever forget, I don't know if you had the same experience, but finding the VHS of Cool Surface in an HMV. Obviously Terry Hatcher was big at the time with the Superman series and all of that. And it having along the front luridly, TV's Lois Lane finally gets naked or whatever. And you're like, oh, you're like a 15-year-old boy. You're like, can I get away with buying this 18 movie?
Yeah.
Because that's what the video VHS era was. It was like, what was when they would dig up a movie that a famous TV actress had done, 3 or 4 years before that she wished would disappear. There was that one Gillian Anderson had done, I think, that
Was it The Turning or
The
something?
Turning. Everyone remembers.
Yeah.
Everyone who's in England remembers going into a VHS store and seeing their TV crushes in,
Yeah.
because VHS. The other great thing about it was this sort of like Wild West in the sense that Gillian Anderson becomes big on the X-Files, and everyone everywhere just scrabbles around to try and find like Gillian Anderson movies that they can release on VHS. And if there's
Yeah.
nudity or lurid content, so much the better. Anyway.
Yeah. I specifically remember a friend of mine, we managed to persuade his mum to rent that out for us. And it turned out not being that entertaining, the film, if
Oh,
I
it's
recall.
such a boring movie.
Yeah.
There's no reason to watch it at all. Even the
Yeah.
nudity, such as it is, you're just like, wasn't worth sitting through this for that.
No,
at least,
it wasn't,
at
sadly.
least the Cool Surface had. I mean, the Cool Surface is one of the worst scripts ever written in the history of scripts, but at least it was sort of, cheesy. You could get some kind of lurid value from it. It was sort of very one of those like softcore TV movie of the week type things that were prevalent in the 90s. And so there was at least some cheese factor to it. But none of these movies that they dredged up and put out were any good. But that didn't stop. That wasn't the point of VHS. The point of VHS was not, is the movie good? The point of VHS was, we can put it out. Let's put it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they still kind of do that a little bit today. You'll get someone like, I think there was an old Barry Keoghan film that kind of got dredged up from about 10 years ago that either never got released or kind of just disappeared. So
Yeah.
that's obviously getting re-released now that he's the new big thing.
There's not quite the sleazy gold rush
No.
that there used to be, though. There used to be, like, now, I mean, I suppose nowadays, nudity in TV and movies is pretty de rigueur. Like, everyone's kind of done it or doing it, or, either that or, you can go on someone's Instagram page and probably see more than you would in a movie. You know what I mean? For some of these younger
Exactly, yeah,
stars or
yeah.
whatever. But back then it was, it was a race to see which, shot in a backwater of the US by a few dodgy guys with a camcorder type movie you could get out on VHS. There was like a gold rush for it. Now we're all too knowledgeable, and I think that's what's sad about living now, because there's no undiscovered treasures in the way that there was back in the day, I feel like.
No, definitely not. I mean, you would kind of discover unless you were looking out for the sort of big iconic things, like everyone knows Jurassic Park's out and when
Yeah.
it's going to come out on video after it's been to the cinema. But I remember going in a number of times, and one discovery at the video shop was seeing Blackjack with Dolph Lundgren, and this was
Yes.
right after I'd discovered John Woo, and so obviously that was like the most exciting thing since sliced bread, just sort of seeing this brand spanking new VHS cover, Dolph Lundgren from the director of Face Off and Hard Target. So
Right.
yeah, those were the days when you could just walk in and just discover something. But I mean, I do remember seeing obviously Executive Target probably around about a similar time, I used to keep seeing the cover for Zero Tolerance as well. I think I
Yeah.
saw that. I eventually got around to that a little while after Executive Target.
You recognize that as a PM Entertainment film right away, or did you put together that PM was a company kind of putting out lots of different types of films then or like later?
No, that came later. So I mean, it was more like, oh, that's that's a T1000, and then obviously with Executive Target, you had Michael Madsen, kind of at the, I suppose, the height of his fame at that point, or he was probably just coming off the height of it, really. But yeah,
Yeah.
he was still quite fairly big, and obviously starring in a lot of mainstream stuff in recent memory. But I think what when I started to notice it a bit more is you watch more and more films. It was probably at that era. Do you remember sort of pound shops, and
Of
they'd have a
course.
load of these sort of PM films, usually in the very thin slip covers.
Yes.
Um, the 99p specials. So I had quite a few PM films there. And then it's just like Orion, Karolko, Canon, that opening sort of company logo, you get that recognition.
Yes.
So, Karolko, Orion, Canon, as well as the kind of the big boys like Disney, they were the ones that I first sort of would recognize again and again from films. And then, yeah, PM came a little bit later, but then obviously you kind of start to recognize all the staples, the more, five or six films, and then you kind of think, I know what they're going for here.
Right. Because I mean, when if you sat down and watched Executive Target, like as the first movie, like you did, you're probably weighing it up against, like you say, the big guy, Cannon, Stallone, you know,
Yeah,
Willis, whatever. You're kind of weighing it against maybe some of the bigger budget stuff, which doesn't make it any less impressive because it's an absolute action-packed masterpiece. But it certainly, if it was the first thing you watched, you would sort of be like, oh, okay, this feels good, but it also feels different. It feels weird. It feels a little off. It feels a little left of center. It's not quite the gloss of Canon or, the budgets of like a Stallone film. But also, I don't know, like, I don't think when I was a kid between the ages of like 6 and 16, when I was first really getting into movies, I don't know that I ever really made that distinction unless it was so clearly, obviously, like shot on video or something. But I mean, most of the time, if I put a movie in and there were recognizable people in it, you know, the budget's never really entered into it in my head. But I suppose you
yeah,
do you consciously compare it to other action films you've seen. But obviously, by the time you've seen 4, 5, 6, 7 PM films, is your feeling like mine was that well, when I see that PM logo, I'm always going to get delivered something that I'm going to enjoy. There's always going to be something in here that I can kind of grasp onto and enjoy. And obviously, by that point, you're also watching kind of other straight to video action stuff, Dolph stuff, Speakman stuff, Gary Daniels, whatever it is. And actually, when you start to look at PM up against the other straight to video stuff, PM, I think, shines way above a lot of that other stuff and still does, like to this day. I mean, no disrespect to anyone putting out like the straight to video action stuff now, and I still watch it, still love it, still whatever. But it's uncomparable to something like Executive Target, I feel.
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what they really understood was, getting bang for your buck, um, and just packing it with so much action. I'm not even entirely sure how they managed to pack so much
Right.
into the budgets. I mean, it was just amazing. And obviously, it also became sort of this almost like a playground for a lot of these stunt guys. So,
Yeah.
it'd be a good lot of guys that had been on bigger movies and sort of would come and do these as well. Guys that would obviously become, huge in the stunt world a few years later. But it just seemed to be this thing where let's get these great stunt people in, let them do their thing, and just pack it with action, explosions. And then, they probably recognized certain things that, the certain formulas that always seem to work. So, you could go and make a Die Hard clone or obviously Executive Target is very kind of heavily inspired by The Rock.
I thought
Um,
that as well. Yes, it's got a real
yeah,
rock vibe to it, even though the plot is different. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, it's they do that. They know what kind of sells and what people will recognize and what people expect in those kind of movies. But then they kind of, in terms of delivering your expectations, they do it with aplomb.
Yeah. So when you started, like you say, like zero tolerance, you remember Executive Target, did you ever start to then seek out PM films? Did they become a staple for you, or was it just that when you watched one, you enjoyed it?
Yeah, initially it was like I would watch them and then I would enjoy them. I think Gary Daniels is probably the main culprit for really kind of making me go from I'm liking these films to recognizing, this is a PM film, because
Right.
obviously he was so prolific with them. The
Yes.
first one was sort of Firepower, and I kind of watched that because it had the Ultimate Warrior, and he was my kind of my idol as growing up as a wrestling fan.
Yeah.
So I kind of watched that out of curiosity to see him in that. I knew of Gary Daniels by then anyway, so that was obviously another bonus. And it just kind of snowballed from there, really.
And now, would you consider them, in terms of your fandom for PM, are they a frequent for you, or again, are they just sort of all part of the soup of B movie action that you like to watch in general?
No, they're a frequent for me. So I think, yeah, like you say, they do stand above quite a lot of the other studios of the time.
Yeah.
And again, you look at it, there's so many really sort of spectacular action films with always with all these massive stunts and the staple car flips and things like that. I mean, it does get to the point that even like watching alone with my brother, we kind of had our own terminology of we called it the PM flip.
Yeah.
So anytime you see the car sort of corkscrew through midair with explosion behind it, that would be we'd call it the PM flip. So that's kind of that's when it becomes ingrained in you.
Yeah. You see, for me, it was all about, I grew up and I think my first experience, I mean, although I'd watched obviously movies, all the movies you're kind of talking about, my first experience with any kind of out and out action outside of James Bond at Christmas would have been the A Team. And,
Yeah,
the A Team to me, if you're an A Team fan, I don't know how you can't be a PM fan, because to some extent, what PM does, like if the A Team had $1 million every time, every episode, then the A Team would be like a PM film every week. You know what I mean? They they
yeah,
they have, there's an action sequence at the beginning, or some kind of crime or something that happens at the beginning. There's always going to be a big action sequence at the end. There's a section in the middle where they build something, and probably another section in the middle where they'll flip at least one car, right? That's the A
yeah,
Team. PM takes that, as far as I'm concerned, PM takes that, mixes in a bit of Hollywood soup, and then, you know, puts it through their budget. And also, I think their just the way they wrote movies is always, and we talked about this a little bit on the episode that's up right now, Last Man Standing, where my colleague Jim was talking about the fact that, like, they're writing, like what you say, sort of like a cliche plot, or a plot that, is enough to hang a few action sequence baubles on, and then they'll come up across against a narrative problem. And we'll get into this because you're a screenwriter, so I'm sure you're aware of what I'm talking about. But they'll come across a narrative problem, right? How does this character know this information in order for this character to do what we need this character to do, which is, blow up this car, or jump off a cliff, or whatever it is, right? They'll come up with a narrative problem. And the way PM solves those narrative problems is always just a little bit like, just ever so slightly left of center, where you kind of go, I understand how they made that leap, but no one else would ever have made that leap. You know what I mean? And I think
yeah,
that once you watch as many as I am in sort of frequent succession, as much as the stunts and the pyrotechnics and other things are, the reason you keep watching, just occasionally there are plot points married often with a wacky lead performance, whether that's like a Wings Hauser or whether that's a Michael Madsen or whether that's even Gary Daniels as he was sort of getting better and better as an actor. Because I think he does. I think you see him progress
Yeah,
through these
yeah,
movies and become better as an actor. Whatever that is, I think the marriage of those two things with the action sort of defines a PM film in a way that doesn't really happen with Canon or Calco or some of these other companies. There's always something that feels just a little lost in translation with PM, but I kind of love that. That's kind of what I gravitate towards because I'm sort of into that. And I don't mean ironically, I don't watch these films to like sneer at them. I mean because they're slightly different from other movies I watch. There's a joy to that. There's an intrigue there. There's just that's a weird yet strangely satisfying way to solve that narrative problem. Do you know what I'm talking about?
yeah. I've noticed a few things like that. I kind of like that the through a lot of their films as well. They tend to sort of throw in a few quirky characters here and there as well.
Yes, they do.
And
They
sort
do
of
what I call the Larry Cohen effect.
yeah, which I think always helps. If you know, if like there's characters that are a bit odd or a bit different, it's better than just having 9 or 10 typical bad guy archetypes, on the villain roster or whatever it might be. So yeah, just these kind of left of field decisions making them a little bit more intriguing. It might not necessarily be objectively good all the time, but it makes it more interesting, I suppose, than being too kind of straight and too sort of linear, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, as I get older, sort of the idea of good and bad becomes kind of a moot point. I tend to kind of think to myself, if I enjoy it, it's good. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like I try
yeah,
not to make too many things because once you start playing the game of, and I'm not saying this is what you're doing, I'm just using this as sort of a talking point to kind of jump off on. But sort of once you start playing the game of saying, well, a movie has to be this, or a narrative problem has to be solved this way, or dialogue needs to sound this. You are, I think, restricting and defining a medium that we're still figuring out. I mean, I know a lot of people want to say that movies are dead and that Hollywood is dying and that, TV series are now the thing and now the gold standard and whatever. But I think we're still like we're only 100+ years into movies. I think we're still figuring it out. It's not like plays are dead or musicals are dead or books are dead. Like, and people are changing the forms of those art forms all the time. So, I don't subscribe to restricting movies to be a certain thing. And so when I say PM can often solve a narrative problem creatively or weirdly or in a way that brings me joy, I like it because there needs to be movies out there that do things in their own way. And it's odd because even though initially they are movies that are made to ape Hollywood, simply fill up shelves in the VHS store and to essentially make a buck from. There's a weird auteur. I hate to be kind of pretentious. I'm not trying to be pretentious about PM, but there is a sort of auteur vibe to them because they are a PM film. Like when you watch a PM film, it doesn't matter what era they're from, and it doesn't even really matter who's writing and directing them. There's just a PM way of doing things, and it is its own kind of authorship without being. I'm trying not to be. I'm trying
yeah.
to just be regular about it, but you kind of know what I mean, right?
I know what you mean, definitely. Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
that's a joy. As a screenwriter, then, and you work a lot in genre film. Is that fair to say? You work a lot in kind of sci-fi and horror and action and sort of straight to video stuff.
Yeah, that's my forte. I suppose it's also I mean, it's always been a strong market and things that you can kind of achieve on lower budgets. So yeah, I'm kind of there. Whether I mean, I aspire to do other things, but I do enjoy doing it and do enjoy writing. What I hope every now and again, I aspire to write a kind of PM-esque film or a
Yeah.
Canon-esque film.
So I was going to ask, obviously, with this background in, I think similar background to myself, like obviously a kid of the video store and obviously a fan of genre film, specifically action. Do you find yourself sort of working in tropes, not so much from Hollywood, but from PM or Canon films, into your screenplays, either consciously or subconsciously?
Yeah, it'll be a mixture of both, really. Sometimes, I mean, if I'm writing for hire, for example, I might have a plot come to me, and it's just I'm there to flesh it out, and usually they want you to stick quite vehemently to formula. I
Yeah.
suppose from a producer point of view or a distributor's point of view, if I'm doing sort of the PM way, I guess, and being quite left of field and kind of doing some trying to do stuff in a slightly quirkier way or my own kind of way, they might say, well, can you just steer it back to, you know, standard formula?
Right.
So yeah, it can be creatively limiting in some ways. That obviously, for PM, they had that advantage that, the guys that were running it were also the ones making the films.
Yes.
So yeah, that was obviously a good advantage for them. But in
Do you
terms
not
of
find, because I see that you work with, there's sort of a couple of production companies that you kind of work with. Not, I mean, you work with lots, but like there's a couple that you kind of work with again and again a little
yeah,
bit, just looking at your IMDb. Are they different then? Are they set up where there is just a sort of executive, this imaginary like suit guy at the top who just sits there and wants movies made who have never really made movies? Or are the producers in this case, like PM, also movie makers?
it's a bit of a mixture. So
Okay.
I've had both sides of the coins really. I've also worked a few times with Mark Lester, who directed Commando.
Oh yeah.
So and he's now kind of more like the suit in the background, but obviously because he's made films, he's very knowledgeable. He's kind of been there, done it, and got the t-shirt. So working with him has always been really quite easy, and he's always open to sort of ideas that might go a little bit left of center, or trying to add elements into it that might feel fresher than just kind of going by the same old tropes again and again. Some
Yeah.
some executives just want the tropes because it's there. When in the streaming age, you're so dependent on hooking in an audience within the first sort of 30 seconds. I mean, back in the VHS days, if you went on, if you rented a VHS tape, you almost felt compelled to finish it, no matter how much you might hate it.
Right. Yes.
But in the streaming age, it's just so easy. You might be a minute in and think, "Oh, I'm not doing this." Flick over to something else. So
Well, not only
yeah,
that, but in the UK where we both grew up, that we only had, I mean, we only had 3 channels when I was born, but we
yeah,
only had 4 channels by the time I was sort of 10 years old. And very rarely would there be 4 good movies playing on 4 different channels at the same time. So very often, if you were
yeah,
watching a movie on Channel 4 or BBC 2 or something, it was the only movie on. So again, there was this sort of captive audience. Even if it didn't get you right away, you're like, well, I don't want to watch anything on the other 3 channels. I can't imagine growing up in America with the cable channels of at least, 50 stations and then 90 stations and now thousands of stations. I would never have finished a movie. I would just be like, oh, this is on channel 89. Oh, this is on channel 100 and whatever. I would be skipping around. Whereas I say that I think the training that we had where you had to finish the movie and you felt like a little obliged to kind of get through it in its own way, I think led us to see more things, experience more things and kind of experiment more as well in a way.
yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I think the sheer volume of content now, it's quite difficult to really kind of stand out.
Yeah.
And even if you do something fresh and a bit different, you've always got that problem that the algorithm might not give you a good placement and you might
Yeah.
get kind of lost in everything else. So, there's never a rhyme or reason to what ends up being successful, particularly sort of in the low budget realm. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
suppose the last time I knew and I'm not counting like Millennium or whatever, whoever made the Expendables films and stuff, because I still
Yeah.
consider those mid-budget, or a higher budget than low budget. The last sort of low-budget production house that I can remember making a splash enough that regular schmoes knew their name was like Asylum with the Sci-Fi Channel movies. Like there
Yeah.
was that brief moment, and I don't think it's still going on. Maybe it is, I don't know, but there was maybe Sharknado 28 or whatever it was kind of finally killed it. But they were the last studio I can think of that had a platform, the Sci-Fi Channel, but also were doing enough of the sort of wish fulfillment mashup, Roger Corman style stuff that,
Yeah.
what's funny is you then see Roger Corman being like, well, shoot, they're doing Sharknado. I need to do Sharktopus or whatever his film was, right?
Yeah.
Then there was this sort of battle of B-movie monster movies. Are there other production? I mean, you're more in the industry, so are there other production companies now that you think are kind of making that name for themselves that would fit within the sort of PM to Asylum kind of graph?
I don't think there's anyone really at the sort of the PM level, really. There's quite a few that aspire to be more like Asylum. I mean, Asylum is still going relatively strong, I think. They still deliver quite a lot. I think there's the company I've worked with quite a few times, ITN. They churn out stuff at an amazing kind of volume, and obviously because of the short shoot schedules and low budgets, a lot of it isn't hugely great, but they kind of hit a bit of they've sort of found a little corner of the market with Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey.
Oh, right. Yes.
The sort of the public domain thing, and they've kind of that was unexpectedly successful. I mean, they've always had that kind of way of that model of making movies has been around for ages, where make it for X amount, make a tidy profit on it, and sort of churn them out. Obviously, the budgets have gone down and the profit margins are slightly different levels, but that kind of changed their way of doing it slightly. So they've got kind of like a larger tier movie, and then they've got all the sort of Asylum knockoffs that kind of go straight to streaming channels.
Yeah.
And it's a case of putting out maybe 100 movies a year and hoping they do well on kind of advertising video on demand. So, stuff like Tubi or the YouTube channels that are kind of coming out now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very much a volume game in that kind of arena. But again, in terms of like how PM did it, I think what a lot of these studios now underestimate, and this probably goes right up to even the biggest studios, I think they underestimate the power of entertaining your audience and making a good film and kind of delivering what they want. I think the more and more we've kind of been taken over, I suppose, by executives in terms of running it rather than creatives. Because even going back to the Corman model, which is kind of like perpetuates all of this, he was always a creative. He started off as a director and he made movies, so he knew what it was about.
Yeah.
I think people just underestimate delivering what an audience would want to see and really setting out to entertain them. So I think PM always did that.
Yeah, and I also think there's and again, I have no problem with Asylum, and I'm not judging any person who manages to make and put out a movie. I think if you manage to do that, fantastic. Hats off to you, because it's hard enough, right? But I think there was that sort of so bad it's good thing that I think kind of cropped up, I don't know, probably about 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago, where sort of that, The Room and Samurai Cop and all that kind of thing, where once people got online and could kind of share movies that they considered so bad it's good. And I'm not a fan of that phrase. Like I say, if I enjoy a movie, I think it's good. You know what I mean? I think taking the piss out of Samurai Cop, it's like shooting. Not only that, but like the people who made Samurai Cop clearly are in on the joke, because it's full of jokes. Like the movie is full of them goofing around. Like it's not meant to be a serious movie. But anyway, I think that kind of watching stuff ironically Which again, are no judgment. I mean, watch movies however you want, but like I think that led a little bit to this thing where, coupled with the asylum, which obviously lent into the whole idea of, well, we're purposely making a bad movie. It's called Sharknado. It's about sharks in a tornado. Of course, it's a bad movie or whatever. They kind of lent into that. I think it meant that rather than the idea when PM was around that there is a discerning audience out there that has multiple choices, that in order to stick with your movie needs to thrill and entertain them. I think now there are certain executives, and I might be wrong, but there are certain executives that go, people like watching shitty movies, so don't even bother. Do you know what I mean? I think there was a mindset that changed between viewing the audience as discerning, even if it's not, and then viewing the audience as just a disposable mass that just wants to eat up whatever stuff you put out, right? I think that what I see from streaming channels, and I'm not talking necessarily about the independent movies and stuff that you put out, but I'm talking about like the stuff Netflix does or the stuff Amazon Prime does or whatever. Because it's not just the very low budget guys. Netflix will spend $300 million on a movie they know is crap. You know what I mean? That they know is just, we need to fill up the platform with. And my argument would always be, well, actually, there are independent companies out there, like the ones you work with, making movies. If you actually gave them a platform rather than throwing $300 million away on whatever nonsense you're doing with The Rock and Ryan Reynolds this week, if you gave them a little bit of a platform, but encouraged them to produce better content. So if you sort of said, well, instead of spending 300 million, we're going to give this company over here that's been knocking out movies, we're going to give them 500,000, a million, 2 million, whatever it is. We're going to give them $5 million to make a few movies, but they have to reach a certain level of quality. I think we could get back to a little bit of that PM thing. As it is, though, like you say, you've got people, either making tons and tons of stuff for very small budget to just kind of hope one day the spaghetti they're throwing at the wall sticks, or as it did with Sharknado, as it did with Blood and Honey and the Popeye movies and all that kind of stuff, or you get these big, fat, bloated Netflix things that you just kind of go, all right, that's fine, but I don't really understand why that's on Netflix. You know what I mean? I don't know whether that's just me, but
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I just think it's that content mentality now where, in the PM days, even a lot of the straight to video companies that, I suppose more people with a more sort of elitist attitude to film would have looked down upon. But you look back retrospectively now at the PM films and even a lot of the New Image films and a lot of these other companies where in comparison to maybe the equivalents now, they just feel more sincere.
yeah.
And again, there was a little bit more money put into them. You could almost see that there's a lot more care and attention there. But again, you could get more for your money back then as well.
Right. And I think it's why in the world that we're in right now, I've always really respected Scott Adkins, obviously, not only because of his martial arts prowess, but he seems to pick movies that even if they're low budget, even if they're straight to streaming, and even if they can't afford to do the action every 6 minutes or whatever that PM could do, they're at least striving to be a movie. They're at least striving to be a well shot, well written, well acted. I mean, some of the stuff him and Jesse V. Johnson did together, again, I feel are the closest we get to like PM in these days because they're so well made, so well scripted, but on a shoestring budget.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always think that Scott's doing some really interesting stuff. I think Van Damme still occasionally puts out something where you're like, oh, okay, he's leaning into his age now. He's trying to do more dramatic stuff. Like there's some interesting things there. But so before we move on to Executive Target, though, and this has been a fantastic conversation, two last questions. First of all, do you have a favorite PM film?
I would say probably by a whisker, it's Riot.
Okay.
With Mr. Gary Daniels, Mr. PM.
Yes,
suppose you
indeed.
could call him. But then, there's so many that are really consistent. And obviously, you mentioned Last Man Standing before. That one would push any of them close, I think, as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And as I watch
Yeah.
more and more, because I had seen, by the time I started doing the podcast, I had seen, all the ones you would expect me to have seen, right? The Cyber
Yeah.
Trackers, Rage Riot, Recoil, Executive Target, Zero Tolerance, Last Man Standing, those kind of ones. Running Red, the Speakman ones as well. But watch it, coming across and discovering films like Steel Frontier or the Wings Hauser Living to Die, there are still those ones out there that are not going to be rolling off the tongue in the way that Last Man Standing or Executive Target does, but that are still well worth tracking down and having a good time with. And I think that's that, the C. Thomas Howell stuff. I don't think I'd seen a lot of the C. Thomas Howell stuff, but like Pure Danger is an absolute trip. It's such a fantastic movie, and obviously The Sweeper and others. So there is there's a lot more gold to mine, which I'm very, very excited to find out. And then my last question to you then, sir, before we get on to the movie is, if someone wants to dive in to the world of Tom Jolliffe and start watching your fantastic movies that you've written, produced, starred in, things like this, where would you have someone start? Do you have a personal favorite? Do you have a top three? Do you have a recommended? Sure, go start here. What would you say?
Yeah. So I'll start with Cinderella's Revenge because that's got Natasha Henstridge in.
Yes, it all
And
comes back full
yeah,
circle to the Henstridge. Love it.
absolutely. Yeah. Produced
Yeah,
by Mark Lester as well, that one was.
nice.
But I cannot tell you how happy I was because I wrote that knowing that the fairy godmother, who she plays, I knew that there was going to be a name involved and that they were going to get a name to play that character. So when they confirmed it was going to be Natasha Henstridge, I was quite happy, to say the
Oh,
least.
oh my
Um,
goodness, that's fantastic. I'm so glad we
yeah,
didn't. I'm so glad we came full circle with that rather than us talking about that at the beginning. That makes it so
yeah,
much more narratively exciting. Yes, okay. So Cinderella's Revenge, great.
yeah. Renegades, which has got Danny Trejo in, Michael Pare,
It's
Nick
a Paret
Moran, and
film.
yeah.
Ah, I'm doing a Michael Paret series over on the After Movie Diner. I'm doing In the Paret Way with my
Okay,
friend
yeah,
Gary Hill, and we've been covering a bunch of Paret films. Now I get to cover a Paret film written by someone I know now. That's fantastic. Awesome. Well, we'll definitely
yeah.
cover this movie.
Great. And then the next one is my kind of first foray into producing my own feature. So it's The Baby in the Basket, which I co-produced with a couple of friends of mine. That one's got Mariam Diabo in, who was in The Living Daylights.
Yes.
And yeah, that's a kind of old school gothic horror film. So that's kind of my most recent one. And we were really happy with that one, how that turned out as well.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I will tell everyone that these movies are available on Foursome, Prime Video, Tubi, all over the place. So there's no excuse, please, to support, as I said when Corey Danner was on and urged everyone to go buy Corey's books. Please, everyone go watch Tom's movies because, along with our love of PM and sharing movies and stuff, my big love is supporting others and sharing others' achievements. So I'll be watching them, and I want everyone else listening to go watch them. Tom, thank you so much for letting us know where we should start. And then, I mean, the fact that you've written a Paret film, that's going to the top of my list because I'll just get Gary and I to review that at some point in our journey through the way of Paret. But yeah,
Yeah.
so that was a fantastic conversation just about like PM and about the way they made movies and the way that people are making movies now. I love being able to thread all that together. But let's move on to the film at hand, which is 1997's Executive Target. As is tradition here on the PM Entertainment Podcast, Tom, would you like to have a crack at the plot, sir? What is the plot of Executive Target?
Okay, so this kind of falls into the quirky vibe, I suppose. A stunt car driver is broken out of prison, played by Michael Madsen, and he's tasked with being a getaway driver at first, and then he's forced to kidnap the president because this terrorist organization I think they've got an underground bunker as well, as always. they've got this plot to off the president because some nefarious person wants him out the way.
Well, it's talking about the A team, of course. It's everyone's favorite Lance Legault, who people will know played Colonel Decker on the A team,
Yeah.
and apparently was relegated to just playing whenever anyone needed a chief of staff or a general or some form of military person within the government. He just shows up, and Lance Legault did a few PM films. Yes, he's one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, right? He's one of the generals, and
Yeah.
they get this new president who's looking to not defund the military, but let's just not pump as many billions into
Yeah.
the military-industrial complex. And Lance Legault's not having that, so he enlists Keith David and his underground lair of whatever they're doing down there, Area 55.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, Area 55, and they've got Matthias Hughes down there, who who gets described as being a Fabio-looking something or other at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, Madsen is kind of broken out. He's a stunt driver, which is an interesting. Obviously, they did that later on with Drive with Ryan Gosling.
Yeah.
So that obviously means he's ace behind the wheel, which obviously facilitates a lot of impressive car chases.
Oh, incredible. I mean, the movie
Yeah.
is 2/3 car chase, which I'm fine with, by the way. That's not a that's not a negative. That's a positive. But and it's interesting actually, because yes, as you said, he gets broken out of prison, co-opted to like drive a getaway car, and then he's going to steal the president. What's weird is that the president plot, such as it is, PM have gone, well, we can't, for some reason, and again, it's sort of narratively odd, but I also kind of like it. Any other movie would have just gone, we're going to get Michael Madsen, we're going to, kidnap his wife, hold him to ransom, he's got to kidnap the president, he's got to do something against his will that he doesn't want to do in order to save his wife or keep his wife from being killed. And then along the way, Michael Madsen's going to try to either get out of it or to escape with the president or whatever, but the villain's always going to be one step ahead. That would be like the generic plot. That would be the plot that we've seen lots of times before, right? We've seen,
Yeah.
there was just one with Liam Neeson made recently where his kids are in the car, there's a bomb under his car, he has to go do a thing he doesn't want to do, but if he doesn't go do it, they're going to explode the car or whatever. And it's all about, every time he tries to make a phone call or something like that, the villains have bugged his car or they shoot his friend, or, there's always, there's these movies where, the main person is put under, I suppose Escape from New York is kind of like that, or, whatever it is. But what's interesting with this one is PM goes, well, obviously the opening is him being broken out of the prison bus that he's on. So that's our big opening set piece, right? And obviously the end set piece is, him getting revenge against Keith David and his, army of minions in their underground bunker. So we've got our beginning and end, right? The middle just can't be him kidnapping the president. This is what I assume the writer, Jacobson Hart and Dayton Cali kind of had this discussion, because instead of kidnapping the president at the end of the first act, which is narratively kind of what you would do, right?
Yeah.
And then the second act would be like all the problems that are put in front of them. And then the third act is solving those problems. The second act, PM go, well, no. We need more car chases. So Keith David, even though Keith David has said, in fact, no, Keith David's minion, is it Gareth Williams? Even he said, if we didn't need a getaway driver, like if we didn't need a stunt driver, right, I could do the job. Like if we didn't need him for this reason, someone else could do the job. So they already know that Michael Madsen is like the driver they need. Yet when Keith David kidnaps his wife and gets Madsen on the way to doing his bidding, he has Madsen do a getaway run for like some bank robbery that doesn't really connect to anything. It's just to like test him again, right? Is that what it is?
I suppose, yeah, it is. I mean, again, it's one of those sort of quirky choices, isn't it? And again, like you say, just, we need a reason to cram in another car chase.
But what's nice about it is, and again, I think that I get, maybe I'm too simplistic, but what I love about a movie like Executive Target is that while there are obstacles in front of Madsen, obviously, Keith David has all these people, and he has his wife kidnapped and blah, 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 blah. In general, though, like when he kidnaps the president and then escapes with the president and double crosses Keith David and figures it all out, he does it with relative ease. I mean, yes, he has to drive and escape and blah, 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 blah. But there aren't so many obstacles put in front of him that he can't achieve what we hope he achieves. And I quite like that. I don't like these movies where they just throw a lot of needless conflict in there. I quite like it if the plot simply is, well, I've kidnapped the president, but of course, I don't want to be kidnapping the president, so I'm going to also free the president. And the president never argues against him or anything like that. He just goes with it. I always call it like the 24 syndrome, which is, at some point someone's going to go, oh, just let Jack Bauer kill everybody. But there has to be 8 episodes where the president or the head of CTU or whatever has to conflict with Jack Bauer so he doesn't quite kill everyone all at the beginning. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I sort of think to myself, I would just like it if they did a TV series where every episode Jack Bauer was just allowed to kill everyone. And PM Entertainment kind of do that. They don't put too many, even his wife who gets kidnapped, they're kind of estranged until the end. It's not even that they're wildly in love or that he cares that much about her, it's all very low stakes, it feels like.
Yeah, it is a bit, yeah. And I think Michael Madsen seems sort of way more competent than the people he's up against.
Right.
I suppose that's an action staple anyway, but even more so really that he's not really especially challenged or stressed or he never gets put through the ringer, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think so. One thing I did want to bring up, I think what is sad about the Michael Madsen films that he does for PM is that Madsen was sort of dismissive of them. And what I find odd about that is that if you look at Madsen's career, yes, he's done 300 plus movies. And yes, occasionally in those 300 plus movies, there's a Tarantino film or there's a Species or there's a Donnie Brasco or whatever. But 90% of what he's done has been straight to video stuff, for good or for bad, right? And I would have to say, having watched a ton of it, the PM films that Michael Madsen does stands head and shoulders above the other straight to video stuff he does. So this idea that he would be sniffy about PM, I think it bothers me really strongly.
Yeah. I mean, it might be just a sense of that, obviously his career highlights working with Tarantino. He might feel that he's above a lot of what he's done, but I suppose, if he's there for a paycheck, that might be his main motivation, really.
Right, I mean, but when you've done as much sort of schlock as he's done, at what point are you not just that kind of actor and should show up and do the job and be grateful that you're getting hired at all at a certain point? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, Eric Roberts is similar in that he's incredibly prolific and does, he can do 20, 30 films a year sometimes. Yeah. But he really sort of loves what he's doing.
Yes.
And really he'll rarely sort of phone it in, except for those roles where someone literally hires him to be on at the end of a phone call.
Yes, didn't he do Grumpy Cat the movie over the phone or something?
Yeah, probably. I mean, he's done a few roles here and there over Zoom. So yeah, but I mean, he'll enjoy it and put the effort in. I sometimes get the sense watching some of Madsen's sort of straight to video films that he doesn't particularly want to be there, but he wants the paycheck.
Right, and it's always sort of
I don't think he's necessarily entirely that way here. He seems to be having a good time, at least.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say is yes, Executive Target, he at least services the film, he doesn't sink it, right? I always, the person I always use as an example, and I've said this before, but the person I always use as an example is Michael Caine. And Michael Caine bothers me to some extent because he will admittedly, openly admit that when he's just taking the movie for a paycheck or because no one else was hiring him at the time, that he doesn't work hard in those films.
Yeah.
And as much as I love Michael Caine in all his famous performances and even some of the smaller ones that people might not know that I like him in, like Without a Clue with Ben Kingsley or whatever, those kind of films, as much as I do like Caine in a lot of stuff and obviously think he's a fantastic actor, when you watch him in something like Oliver Stone's The Hand or The Island or the Jaws, infamous Jaws sequel or whatever, when you watch him in those and he's literally doing, he's basically gone, look, you get 2 takes and then I'm going back to my trailer, when you watch that, it really, really, really pisses me off because I'm like, you're there to do a job. You're being paid to do a job. Do the damn job, whether it's one day, on a B movie somewhere, or whether you're the lead of a Christopher Nolan film. It shouldn't matter. I don't understand people who make the distinction. So similarly, when I hear Michael Madsen, and again, he's perfectly fine in Executive Target, but when I hear Michael Madsen sort of talk down to it, but then I see people like, contemporaries of his, like Wings Hauser, like C. Thomas Howell, like even Keith David in this movie, who are just like, I am going to give this the beans, whether I'm being paid beans or millions of dollars. I will always respect that way more than someone who shows up and goes, I don't really want to be here, so I'm just going to mumble my way through the role. Thankfully, Madsen doesn't do that too much here. There's the odd hint of it. He's not giving it the full Madsen, but it as I said, it works well for his kind of stoic, gruff-voiced stunt car driver who's a man of action, not a man of words. You know what I mean? I guess it works for this performance. This might be the latest point in any PM Entertainment podcast episode that the bullet points show up, but here they are.
It's the PM Entertainment bullet points.
All right, we have Roy Scheider's unflappable toupee, Keith David's underground bond lair. 2 cars hit prison bus, both cars explode. Truck hits prison bus, toppling it over, front of prison bus explodes. Truck smashes police cars out of the way, police cars explode. 2 cars crash into each other, they both explode. Trucks ride over a police bike, then hit multiple cars that all explode. Cop car hits camper van, explodes, and then continues to plow through the camper van, tearing it in half. The bad guys have an enormous military-grade machine gun, and they blow up not 1, but 2 helicopters that both explode in the air, fall to the street, and explode again. Street explodes, sending flaming and exploding police cars flipping and soaring through a wall of fire repeatedly, over and over to the strains of a majestic vocal chorus. Gunplay, street shootout, cars bursting into flames. That's different than exploding. Car chase. Car chase becomes longer car chase with cops in pursuit. Car jumps, crashes into truck full of empty boxes, comes out the other side. Cop cars flip over. Cars jump over other cars using magic accelerator pedals. Hero car always makes it. Cop cars not so much. Hero car blocks woman with stroller while all other cars crash into everything else. Car again magically jumps over truck and somehow makes it. Police cars not so much. Van chase, more car wrecks. Van drives through whole warehouse full of empty boxes and some loose tomatoes and cabbages. Truck drives over several police cars. Another hugely violent street shootout. Villain lair shootout. Man falls through glass. Walkways randomly explode. Man shot off high walkway. Man shot through pane of glass and into a high fall. Probably more blood squibs used in this movie than any other PM film. Gratuitous Michael Madsen Hawaiian shirt. Gratuitous Michael Madsen 70s leather jacket. Gratuitous Michael Madsen roll neck. Gratuitous Matthias Hughes cameo. Gratuitous Robert Miano. Gratuitous best friend sacrificing life for hero. But in terms of acting, let's talk Keith David. Let's talk how he just chews this entire setup.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, he's always on it. I think he's always great, Keith David. Again, like you say, he's one of those reliables that he'll come in on a film set, doesn't matter the budget level, and he kind of knocks it out the park.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, he is wandering around his underground Bond-like lair, pontificating and speechifying and preaching and chewing and spitting up the scenery, smoking cigars and talking to his wife, played by Kathy Christopherson, right? Nadia, that's his wife in the movie. He's when she's been kidnapped again. She's kidnapped, but she's just hanging around his his control room, being talked at by Keith David.
Yeah.
And it's quite wonderful. They've kind of given him this antagonist to bounce off, which I think always works well. And then we have to this whole thing that I absolutely adore about this movie is also the fact that Keith David apparently has cameras everywhere. Like, he has cameras mounted everywhere. He can watch every tiny bit of every action that happens, all from his lair, because he's apparently mounted cameras on every vehicle on the street in Los Angeles, as well as a few street cams and ATM cams and other stuff like that. He seems to be able to access all of it, and we don't need to ask too many questions.
Yeah, exactly. You almost wonder, with all that kind of power he's got and all that technical advantage, why he even needed Madsen in the first place. But
right. Well, I suppose he's worried that. I suppose they're worried that he's going to be defunded, but like, nobody even knows that Area 55 exists. Like, they mentioned it to Roy Scheider, the president. He's like, I have no idea. So if it's such a secret, high-tech installation doing whatever it's doing, I don't even know what what their ultimate goal is. I have no idea, but it's not important. Is Roy really going to defund them enough that Keith David's going to be out of Cuban cigars and waistcoats? Like, I don't know. Like, he seems to have a pretty cushy life. In fact, I don't know what everyone's so angry about. But we do get some absolute fantastic motorway mayhem, car carnage in this film, to the point where at the end, there's that incredible piece where the soundtrack, oh my goodness, the soundtrack, it suddenly goes into, like you say, kind of like The Rock or like some big Bruckheimer movie. You suddenly get all these choirs on the soundtrack, all these like ethereal kind of thing, epic sounding soundtrack, as cars in slow motion are kind of corkscrewing and ramping and flipping through like fire and debris and stuff on the road. And they just slow it right down, and they have the choirs come up, and I'm just like, oh, PM is having a field day. I'm loving every minute of it.
Yeah, and it's just it's kind of joyous, isn't it? The fact that they're clearly having a ball of a time.
Yes.
Just putting all this together. Everyone's kind of having fun. It's just the amount of creative control that they give to the stunt people as well, that they're so central to the success of the films.
Oh yeah, completely.
Again, like you say before, harking back to the A-Team, where that was very much, a Craig R. Baxley gig. That, famous stunt guy, directed a lot of the episodes and did, controlled the stunts as well. So yeah. It's, you're making your key selling point, and you're doing it really well.
Oh, and I think it's very obvious with Executive Target, as it was with Last Man Standing. There are certain moments in PM. I think, Last Man Standing is 95, right? And this is 97. And I feel like every couple of years, Joseph especially is sort of saying, because I know this for a fact with Last Man Standing, because Spiro was talking to us about it, that, Joseph was like, we want to take this up a notch. We want to make PM, we want to make that next leap up. And I think that with Executive Target, I get the feeling that after 2 years of sort of doing, because after Last Man Standing, a lot of their movies start to look that polished and that action-packed, and that's at the point where we start to expect PM to be doing the same thing out the gate. And then I think with Executive Target, especially with the slightly starrier, slightly name-heavy cast, but also with the amount of car chases and with the larger sets and everything else we're seeing, I get the feeling that Executive Target is sort of that. It starts then them gearing up towards 1998, 1999, where they're working with, much starrier names. They make the Van Damme movie, etc. I think that this is them taking yet another step forward and being like, how can we make this look even more Hollywood? Because apart from, a couple of scenes here and there, like you say, this could be a very, very, very acceptable Hollywood action movie. No, it doesn't have the gloss of the Bruckheimer movies, maybe, but I think it sits side by side with, any other kind of $50-60 million movie that was being made at the time. Maybe not the $100 million movie, but the $40-50-60 million action movie that was still quite a staple in the 90s. I think this sits side by side with them, and this probably only cost, if it cost $1.5 million, I'd be surprised,
Yeah, I mean, I've always been amazed how much they can eke out of those budgets, because I don't know whether it was the way they cost things back then, but nowadays, if you want to do stuff practically, it almost comes with, a tax on it. It almost comes with an extra cost, even, inflation aside. So doing stuff the way that PM did it, I mean, you'd struggle to do it on 100 million these days, really, to the amount of action that they had and they packed into something like Executive Target. But it looks way beyond its budget. And obviously, adding in a couple of sort of recognizable names, like Madsen and Keith David. Roy Scheider was still, very well known at the time as well.
Oh, I think Roy Scheider, especially for Joseph, was a huge get.
Yeah.
I think he was so happy to say that he made a movie with Roy Scheider in it.
Well, I think Roy, he basically plays essentially the same character in Peacekeeper with Dolph the same year.
Yeah,
that was obviously New Image, and again, took a lot of inspiration from The Rock. But yeah, Roy is this kind of very, you'd almost say, leaning to the left kind of president, very reasonable, very kind of people first.
He's like, maybe we shouldn't have as many homeless people, and maybe we shouldn't be fighting as many pointless wars overseas. I mean, what's funny is it always gets, because of the political climate now, it always gets pushed to seem like wishy-washy lefty ideas, but really it's just centrist. It's just, how a regular person should be, not the insane right wing that we're dealing with now.
Yeah, I mean, it almost makes it seem like fantasy, doesn't it? With Scheider playing someone so reasonable and level-headed.
We've not even had a Democratic president who's ever stood up and gone, maybe we shouldn't have as many homeless people and less wars. I mean, even the people that people lionize and say these phenomenal political icons, none of them have said that at any point. So no, I would, Roy Scheider gets my vote as president. But apparently not Lance Legault, because Lance is like, defund the military, it's one step too far. I gotta call my friend up at Area 55 and have him break at one point, Keith David gets mad at Angie Everhart and Gareth Williams, like a male-female hench person double act, who are the ones kind of, go ahead.
Yeah, they almost seem like they've come out of a Tarantino film.
Oh yeah. They're tasked with, getting Michael Madsen out of jail, and then, getting him into the fray of their business, whatever it is they're doing. And what's hilarious is, obviously, like later on, he escapes when they get him out of prison, off the prison bus. He then jumps into Gareth Williams's yellow muscle car.
Yeah.
He doesn't wait around for them to keep shooting cops. He gets, as you wouldn't. And another thing, like, that's a great writing lesson. There's no other movie that I can think of where the good guy is just like, oh, I see my chance, I'm jumping in this car and driving away. Because it's not what the picture would normally do, right? In any other movie, they would break him out of prison, they would handcuff him, they would throw him in the back of a truck or whatever, and then he would be kidnapped. Like there wouldn't be a whole thing where he gets away and they have to re-kidnap him. But it's PM. They're like, well,
Exactly,
he needs to have, blowing up a prison bus and shooting up a bunch of police cars and crashing a bunch of cars on a main street is not enough. We need a high speed Michael Madsen chase in a yellow muscle car, and that's what we get. And that's why I love them. That's why I love them. But he goes off to see his wife quickly. Well, he goes to see his friend at the strip club, and then he goes to see his wife, and because of course his friend hangs out at a strip club because you've got to get boobs in the movie. We all know how that works. And he goes off to see his wife, and then when he's at his wife, there are two police detectives who were looking at the bus crash earlier on, and goes, well, one of the guys who is missing is this Nick James guy, Michael Madsen's character. I bet he's gone to see his wife. Let's go see the wife. And when they go see the wife, Keith David's lackeys, Angie Everhart and Gareth Williams, show up playing Lacey and Clay. And Clay shoots the two police. And we go back to Keith David, and he's shouting at Angie Everhart, and he goes, I didn't want any connection between us and the police and Nick James and all of this. Like, I didn't want any of this to happen. By killing these police, you've jeopardized this whole thing and blah, 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 blah. Which seems quite reasonable when you're watching it and you're embroiled in the suspension of disbelief required to kind of go along with the film. But when you think about it for 5 minutes, you're like, wait, you blew up a prison transport system. You crashed several cars in the middle of a street. You killed several cops in a hail of bullets, right, in order to kidnap a stunt car driver, right? Instead of just, I don't know, going to any other stunt car driver not in prison. And because it's not like there's only one, right? You've already jeopardized your career. Like, you've already jeopardized who you are and what you're doing and what's happened. Like, you've already given them enough evidence. Shooting a couple more cops in the guy's wife's apartment, I suppose, connects them even closer to Nick James, but only just. And it's just, again, it's one of those things that narratively, when you're watching the movie, you don't think about it. You're just like, yes, she has jeopardized it. Shout at her, Keith David. She was wrong. Her partner, Clay, is an idiot. All the mistakes they've made, this is terribly wrong. Yes, they need to get this whole plot back on track. But really, ultimately, their entire plot is fraught with holes and problems.
Yeah. But I mean, that's always the advantage with a PM film, is that, you don't get enough chance to stop and think about it long enough before the next car chase.
Right. And I don't want to be thinking about it. I only bring it up because it's a fun thing to talk about. But no, when I'm watching the movie, I'm in it, and what I love about this movie is while it does go from A to B to C, and it does have those that 3-act structure, it's not like what you would expect. They've slammed sort of 3 different films together and then kind of glued it together their way. Because like I say, if your point is we're going to kidnap this stunt car driver, hold him to ransom, and he's going to kidnap the president, most other movies, that's their entire plot. And this movie has multiple characters, multiple relationships, multiple twists and turns. As I say, they break him out of the prison transportation. He immediately jumps in a muscle car and is off, and they have to go kidnap him again. You think that the 2 detectives that you meet at the bus crash are going to be kind of the third storyline, right? You think there's going to be like the villains, the antagonist, the protagonist, and then the side characters are going to be these detectives. Nope, they just kill the detectives. So you're like, oh, okay, I guess they're not in the movie anymore. And, and then you have this whole, well, we need him to be the getaway driver for a botched robbery. Why? No explanation. Doesn't matter. But let's have that anyway. And, and then when he does kidnap the president, the whole third act, which essentially could have been all 3 acts of the movie, the whole third act is so, like I say, so few obstacles are put in front of Madsen that his whole plan more or less goes off without a hitch. And there's this wonderful thing where Madsen brings the president of the United States to his like greasy, auto shop guy, car mechanic friend who hangs out at strip clubs and has blow up dolls and sex toys everywhere. And, and then you have Roy Scheider, who's playing the whole thing serious as a heart attack. Like, you believe he is the president. It's so, he knows what movie he's in, but at the same time, he's playing it like he's in Jaws again or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose that's one of those reasons why you hire someone like him. He's just a seasoned pro, and you know what you're going to get, and you know you're going to get someone that's got that gravitas just to really elevate his scenes.
Oh, 100%. 100%. So do you have an executive target? What are sort of your overall thoughts of the film?
I just think I mean, like you say, I mean, it's got these three different kind of movies almost sort of smashed together. Ordinarily, most other people would have done one, but then, you would have felt like it would have dragged in the middle, or it would have been, it would have been spread thin over the course of 90 minutes. But I mean, this one, it packs so much in that it can't fail to entertain you. And again, so many car chases, like incredible car chases as well.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, really amazing stunt work and camera work at a time, I suppose, where, all these great stunt people that they used to work with, they just let them kind of do their thing. I suppose it's hard to say whether they were pushing their luck a bit more, or there were less restrictions or less safety margins or anything like that. But it feels to me like they were really kind of, they really pushed it.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Well,
and
it
again,
was. I still do think we could, our generation, especially because I'm guessing about the same age as I am, that we can really draw a line, sort of pre 9/11 and post 9/11, in terms of the movies that are made, in terms of what everything costs. I mean, since 9/11, and I'm sure greater minds than me have already plotted this out, but the rate of inflation, the rate of corporate influence, the rate of money in politics, all various different things have kind of got to a point where, not only that, but like wealth inequality and everything have ballooned in the last 24 years in a way that was never really, even through the 80s and the sort of Thatcher Reagan years, could never have imagined anything like what's happened since 9/11 and the advantage that has been taken by a lot of companies and countries and politics and everything else. And so, it's unfortunate, I guess. But yes, there's no way on earth you could make this movie today, even if there was I kind of wish there was a town in the Midwest or in Utah or Nevada or somewhere like that. There's so many like ghost towns or small towns or towns where there's only like 3 or 4 people or whatever in the US. I kind of wish some B-movie studio would just buy it so they could do ridiculous car chases and do ridiculous stunts and things.
Yeah.
Simply for the cost of whatever it costs to flip a car, rather than having to always try and do it in Bulgaria or Canada or somewhere where, yes, it's cheaper to make a movie, but it's still millions of dollars, Interestingly as well, I was looking up kind of what 1997 looked like in the action world. And so, I mean, if this isn't an example of a great year that could probably go down in history as one of the best action years, you have Drive, the Mark Dacascos movie, which is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
You have Con Air, which I still think Con Air is like the pinnacle of those insane, overblown 90s machismo action movies. I mean, it in terms of ensemble casts and plots and soundtrack and stunts, I mean, Con Air is just, to me, it's up there. You've got Face Off also comes out that year. I mean, what a banner year for Cage that year. My goodness. Air Force One, of course, which could also be related to Executive Target, very similar kind of thing, but in a different. You've got Tomorrow Never Dies, which is the Bond movie that comes out, which has that incredible motorbike Michelle Yeoh handcuffed together sequence, which I always think of as like a quintessential 90s action film sequence. You've got Conspiracy Theory, Breakdown. There's just some great movies that come out in 1997. And, as I say, like sitting alongside them, Executive Target isn't, no, obviously it's not Con Air. You don't watch it. It doesn't have like necessarily the glossy nature of that, but the stunts are every bit as good as, in most of those movies, I think. It certainly sits side by side with something like Drive, which is sort of an equivalent level in terms of B movies or straight to video movies or whatever you want to call them. So yeah, it was a banner year for action movies, clearly, and I think Executive Target fits in quite nicely as somewhere between the Rock and Air Force One.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and again, I think a lot of films of this era get looked back on a bit more kindly than maybe they did back then as well, because people kind of look back and you get to appreciate, just practical in-camera action a lot more.
Yeah.
When you've become so used to the CGI that they have now.
Yeah, I mean, even
Because
stuff like The Saint and The Jackal, neither of
yeah,
which are Val Kilmer or Bruce Willis's best movies by anyone's standards. At the time, I remember thinking, but now when I watch them, they're really super enjoyable. People are putting on wigs and mustaches and doing ridiculous stunts and things, and you kind of
yeah,
go, yeah, I wish movies were more like this again.
very much so. And even in terms of like straight to video action nowadays, yeah, there's you get a lot of the it's so difficult. You get half the time to shoot them, and they seem to lack a lot of action. I mean, that's always a big drawback when you're watching an action film and it's got no action in it. So, PM was the complete opposite. They really did deliver on what their genre was.
And as you're a Dolph Lundgren fan, The Peacemaker was the Dolph Lundgren movie released in 1997. That was his big tentpole action movie of that era.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that has got. Have you seen that one?
I have, yes, a long time
Yeah,
ago, but
yeah.
yes, I have seen it. Yeah.
That's got a great opening car chase that PM would be proud of, I think, as well. Yeah, rooftop
Yeah.
car chase.
So no, I mean, I think it fits into the era pretty well, and I think that when you look into it, I think 1997 pretty strong year, whether you're talking straight to video or whether you're talking big Hollywood action, pretty strong year for it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, you were reminding me of a few there that I think, oh, I haven't seen that in ages. So I think I'll go catch up on that. I'm due
Definitely.
my sort of biannual Con Air watch as well.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And then the Colm Meaney, John Cusack of it all, and then you've
Yeah.
got I mean, there's just so many. There's Steve Buscemi, and I mean, there's just so many great things. And then what are we looking at for PM Entertainment? Well, 97, not the best year for them. You do get the Underground and Executive Target, which definitely stand out. I would then say second tier PM for that year is probably The Big Fall, which was C. Thomas Howell's one of his last works with them. I've not seen Road Ends. I need to see that. That gets quite a decent score on IMDb, so maybe that one was a bit better. But apart from that, you get Busted, which is the Corey Haim, Corey Feldman sort of sex rom comedy. You get, which is like 10 years too late.
Yeah.
You get Dumb Luck in Vegas. I don't even know who's in that. You get the Little Bigfoot, which is the beginning of the Little Bigfoot franchise. Hollywood Safari, another kind of family kids movie. Bikini Summer 3, South Beach Heat. Earth Minus Zero, Heaven Before I Die. So it's sort of a bunch of PM films that no one is
Yeah.
talking about. At the end of 96, you get Riot, and at the beginning of 98, you get Recoil. But in terms of 97 for PM, Executive Target and The Underground are the two big stunt heavy, action heavy movies that they put out that year. And maybe again, they're like, we're going to spend more money on Executive Target. So, we can only afford to do a couple of these big ones this year. Everything else has to kind of be, because Road Ends is a drama. Heaven Before I Die is kind of a comedy. And a lot of the other ones are sort of family movies that don't necessarily require a lot of big stunts and things. So I think maybe that's what happened. Maybe they plowed some money into the two big ones, and and the rest of them were all made on whatever money they had left.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I think that seems to be a model for quite a few studios as well. I mean,
Yeah.
even now they seem to do that as well. They'll filter a bit more into, I guess, their tent poles.
Yeah. And it is, 97, 98. Well, I would say 98 is sort of the last great year that PM has. I mean, 99,
Yeah,
they do Desert Heat or Inferno, which is one of my favorite Van Damme movies, even before I realized it was a PM film. It's like one of my favorite Van Damme movies. But in general, outside of that, and obviously they're focusing on their TV series, so, they're then spread a little thinner. But really, after that, the ones that stand out are maybe the Speakman ones, Land of the Free and Running Red, Recoil, obviously, and then No Tomorrow, but only for its cast, only because it's Daniels, Pam Grier, Gary Busey, Jeff Fahey. Like it's a really loaded cast. It's not that strong a film, but it's a really loaded cast. And then after that, sort of it falls away because you kind of just get the last few that they do and the last few scraps, and then PM ends in 2000 with Epicenter, which is sort of the last official PM film.
yeah,
A few others come out after that, but Epicenter is the last one that Joseph Merry and Rick Pepin produce in their way. Paul Volk, who was sort of the third guy behind PM, he kind of continues and puts a few more movies out between 2000 and 2002. But yeah, you go from the likes of sort of 95, 96, which are really tremendous years. I mean, really incredible years for PM. I mean, 95, you start with Steel Frontier, you have Rage, you have The Sweeper, you have, well, Sweeper's beginning of 96, but you have Rage, you have Cybertracker 2, you have Last Man Standing, you have The Power Within, you have Hologram Man and Steel Frontier, all in 95. And 96, you have The Sweeper, Skyscraper, Silencers, Pure Danger, Dark Breed, Riot. Those are the two really strong years right in the middle there. And then 97 begins the downturn, but they go out with a bang because I have to say Executive Target and The Underground, phenomenal pair of film.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's not a bad way to sort of bow out, I suppose, just before that decline.
Yeah.
But it happens to the best of them, doesn't it? I mean, Canon had similar, didn't they, where they sort of peaked in terms of the scale with stuff like Masters and Life Force and Superman 4, and then it kind of just tailed off after that until they
Yeah.
just eventually shut down. And again, they kind of skewed off into Golan going one way and Globus going the other.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so favorite scenes out of Executive Target. Do you have any favorite scenes?
I do like the opening car chase with the yellow muscle car, because I suppose it does directly lift from The Rock, where Nick Cage grabs himself a yellow, I think it's a Lambo or Ferrari or something.
Yeah.
So you got this quite similar car chase. Yeah, that's probably I would say probably my favorite scene.
Yeah, for me it's all of the car chases, and then anytime Keith David is like chewing the scenery. Keith David in this movie is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
He's by far my favorite thing in the movie. And then ranking within PM Entertainment films. So where do you kind of put Executive Target? And it doesn't have to be an exact position, but where do you kind of put it? Is it near the top view? Is it in the middle, or is it near the bottom?
It's possibly pushing top 10, but I think yeah, pushing top 10, but I just think because it's so heavily reliant mostly on car chases, it doesn't quite have the variation that you get in something like Guardian Angel, for example, which has got like, speedboat chase, horse chase, car chases, fights. So this is, a bit more, I suppose, reliant on car chases, obviously, because he's a stunt driver. So that was almost a given. And then, there's a few shootouts as well. So yeah, I'd say it's kind of pushing the top 10.
This is my favorite scene in the movie. This was when I was like, this is phenomenal. So Roy Scheider is kidnapped, the president. He's in his motorcade. Michael Madsen in his red Lambo or whatever it is, kidnaps him. And as they're driving away, because obviously he has to escape not just the police, but obviously the Secret Service and everyone chasing them. And there are two helicopters that have been flying above the motorcade, also trying to keep him safe. And you think, well, how's he going to get away with all this? And Keith David has a bunch of his minions, of his many hench people, lining the streets or lining the area. And one of the things that two of the hench people reveal is an enormous machine gun, like one of those like where you have to feed with, it's like it stands on a little tripod, and then you have to feed like the bullets into it. And these two stunt guys have the most immense amount of fun firing this enormous machine gun.
Yeah.
And the enormous machine gun takes out not just one, but two helicopters. Now, we all know that, it's de rigueur for an action movie to have a helicopter explosion. Our friends over at Exploding Helicopter blog know all too well that you need to have an exploding helicopter. PM do back-to-back exploding helicopters over the top of Roy Scheider, who's in the passenger seat being thrown around. You see like they kind of put a gold light above them, so it looks like the explosion's going off above them. And then as they drive away, like the two helicopters come crashing down. That was my favorite scene. Blowing up one helicopter above LA, phenomenal. Blowing up two helicopters and having the debris fall down by some enormous fucking Gatling gun that the two stuntmen are wielding. Oh, joyous, absolutely joyous. Yeah, that kidnap the president car chase is probably my favorite bit.
I think you've convinced me. I think that might be mine as well.
Oh, it's so much fun. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. That's definitely the sequence where I'm like, oh, okay, this is, and yes, I agree with you. There aren't a lot of foot chases. There's not a lot of fisticuffs. There's no martial arts to speak of, and it really is just a lot of car chases. But you kind of get a bunch of car chases, and then you get like a James Bond villain lair explosion sequence at the end. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With a lot of tunnels and, people in rooms with large machines with lights and numbers on that mean absolutely nothing. And so, I to be honest, I'd be hard pressed to find a scene in this movie I don't like. I even like his greasy car mechanic friend who has weird sex toys and things, played by Dayton Cali, who co-writes the movie.
Oh wow, that's a good bit of trivia. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Bella, his sleazy friend,
his character as well. Again, it's a quirky, sort of interesting character that a lot of other films wouldn't necessarily think to put in.
Well, what I love about it is you can just see him and Jacobson Hart sat around writing the movie, and Dayton Cali going, well, if I'm going to be in it, my character is discovered in a strip club where a stripper is paying too much attention to him, and just so that I can just so I can get some stripping in the scene with me. And then when we go back to my house, we'll continue the joke with lots of sex toys and handcuffs and things like that. But no, he's a great character. He's, again, a sort of a comic relief character, a good sidekick character. He's sort of required in a movie like this. And Dayton Cali does a great job writing him, does a great job playing him. And I think the motley crew that we have together by the end, I love that they send Bella in with him, and it's once a Marine, always a Marine kind of thing. He's dying, but that it's worth him and Madsen kind of going in together. I love it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that character as well. Also, you got Madsen bouncing off him a bit more than perhaps he did with some of the other characters in the film.
Yeah, definitely. Now, this is going to be difficult just because obviously a lot of people love Tarantino and he's been in a ton of Tarantino films. But where do we rank this in Michael Madsen's career? As I said, difficult because Madsen is in Reservoir Dogs, Kill Bill, Thelma and Louise, Donnie Brasco, Species, The Hateful Eight. He's in some key movies, right? So difficult to maybe necessarily put Executive Target in like a Madsen top 10, but it's possibly in a Madsen next 10, whatever that would be. Like, it's definitely sort of in his top 20, I think.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think it's one of his stronger. I mean, it's my favorite of his sort of straight to video stuff. So, and obviously that's been the vast majority of his career, really. So, yeah, I would say it ranks fairly high.
Yeah, for me, I think this again, I think it's in probably my top 20 PM, somewhere in my top 20. And it's probably somewhere in my top 12 of Michael Madsen films. That's probably where I put it.
Yeah, I'd probably say, yeah, similar.
All right. Well, is there anything else, Tom, that you would like to say about Executive Target before we wrap up and let the people know where they can find you and what they should, how they should interact with you if you want people to find you or interact with you? Or if you have anything to promote, of course.
Yeah, no, I think Executive Target is well worth a watch. I think, if you like action films, you want to see some spectacular stunts and watch something that's fun. Again, a really nice, tight sort of 90 minutes as well, which is obviously a bonus these days. A lot of films seem to be getting longer and longer. So, again, a nice, tight 90 minutes, just loaded with action. So, yeah,
Yeah, I mean
definitely.
it's actually 1 minute, an hour 36 minutes, which is about
Yeah.
eight minutes longer than most PM films, but they pack those 8 minutes with ridiculous car stunts.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, two exploding helicopters. So, yeah, what more can you want?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, Tom. I honestly don't know what more we could want. I honestly just think that more people should be watching Executive Target right now and just enjoying themselves and realizing there was a world before all this hideousness and it was a thing of beauty. Sir, thank you. It has been an absolute joy talking Executive Target and low budget movies with you today. If you so wish, let people know where they can find you. And if you have anything to promote, do it now.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. It's probably the best place, and that's at Jolliffe Productions. And yeah, if anyone wants to check out my latest film, The Baby in the Basket, that's currently on Tubi in the US, and then a load of other channels as well, also out in the UK. So yeah, give that a check out if you like gothic horror.
All right, fantastic. Well, thanks ever so much for being on the show today, Tom. We will have you back, of course, to discuss more PM in the future, I'm sure. But yeah, thanks ever so much for your time. This has been great. And this should be the episode going out sometime next week.
Yeah, cheers, John. Thanks for having me on. Been a pleasure.
All right, sir. All the best. Take care.
You too, mate. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode on Executive Target. I have one more little Easter egg, little story from Paul Volk, which I'm going to drop at the end of this episode, which is going to leave everyone with their jaw slack by the end of this episode. Your jaw is going to be dropped, hitting the floor when you hear the story about Executive Target from Paul Volk about Michael Madsen. Anyway, I'm going to drop that at the end of this episode, so we'll have a few commercials now, then we'll have Paul Volk's story, and then the episode will be over. But thanks ever so much for listening. As always, please, please, please go over to wherever you get your podcast, rate, review, like, comment, share, whatever it allows you to do. And all the platforms allow you to do at least one of those things. Please, please, please write a review, share the episode on social, like, comment, all of that good stuff. Tell everyone about it. Let's make this show truly successful. We're putting so much work into it. You guys are really, really engaged on Facebook and commenting all the time and sending great messages. That's awesome. I'm super thankful for that. Now let's get the word out to everyone else. All right. Thanks so much. And here is Paul Volk's story that will have your jaw on the floor. Do you have any stories about those particular actors, either people you worked with, someone who kept coming back to PM and was sort of became part of the family? Do you have any stories about recurring cast members?
Well, I'll think one comes to mind, and but I mean, as far as why we use these people, I mean, bottom line, they had to be worth something for sales to begin with. They had
Right.
to. I think another reason we would use them more than once was because we started a relationship with them, and they were, well, maybe not Michael Madsen because he was kind of a dope, a jerk, but we used him, I think, what, 2 or 3 times? Yeah,
Yeah.
at least twice.
Yeah.
Not
I'm not a big fan of his either. So.
Yeah, not because he was a nice guy, but he was worth something.
Yeah. Yeah, that was later. That was sort of so he'd already done Reservoir Dogs.
Oh yeah,
You start
exactly,
using
yeah.
him, I think, in '97. And
Executive
yeah,
Target, and then Rick did a science fiction one with him in it, and
yeah. No, we had one of our writers on the blog, on the website, got to speak to him at some convention in England, and he asked him about PM Entertainment Films because he knew that me as the editor of the website was like a big fan, and Madsen was just very sniffy about it. And I just sort of thought to myself, like, the people I like, the actors I like, the people who star in straight to video stuff that I like are the ones that champion it, not the ones that claim like, well, you know, I just did it for this reason or I did it for that
he did it
reason.
for the money only, for sure. I mean, that was
But he's
that was
still
a
doing
given.
straight to video stuff, so he can
Right.
claim that he just did it for this reason or he just did it for that reason. He did it to have a career. You know what I mean? Like he's
Oh yeah,
having
yeah,
a
yeah,
career. So
yeah.
by shitting on them, the only person he's shitting on is himself. Is the way
Oh,
I look at it. You
hell,
know what I mean?
now that you mentioned it, I have a story here. I have a story in the back of my head, but I got this story too about Michael Madsen. So he
Yeah,
did.
let's just crap on him. I'd love that. No,
Okay. Well, okay. And this is in a way. He did, I don't remember which movie it was, whether it was Rick's science fiction movie or it was Executive Target.
Okay.
But I was finishing it, and I was in sound, and we needed him for some ADR. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, in a lead, you're gonna, well, of course, in low budget, you rarely take much worry about keeping a quiet set. And so we did a lot of ADR quite often, and I became really good at directing it, because when done well, it can really help a lot. When you're only
Yeah.
the noise that you're adding to a scene is the only noise you want to add, because otherwise everybody is replaced in ADR. So I needed ADR. I talked to his agent. I tried calling him directly. He dropped off the face of the earth. We needed to finish the movie. We had to finish our movies in a timely manner.
Yeah.
He just was he would not show up. He would not come. He would not answer my calls. So I'm thinking, fuck, sound alike. I need a sound alike. So this was what, in the mid '90s. But somebody had told me that they knew a radio guy that was also from Brooklyn, that thought because he's from Brooklyn, maybe he can sound like
Madsen.
Madsen. And he gave me his number, and his name was Jimmy Kimmel. So I called up Jimmy
Really?
Kimmel. Yeah, I called up Jimmy Kimmel, and I asked him if he would come in and do Madsen's voice for me. I sent him. I played for him over the phone some of Madsen's lines, and he was just really low, and I mean, the way Madsen was low key, hardly spoke up. That was one of the reasons we had to do freaking ADR, because he'd hardly speak up. He was so quiet quite often, whether it called for that or not in the scene.
Right.
And Jimmy said, yeah, sure. Would you come to meet me at the sound facility, which was in Burbank on Magnolia, and so he was not, no, he had a radio show or something. So I meet him there. He attempts to do the ADR. It didn't work very well at all, actually, but we had no choice. We put it in the movie. And so there's, I don't know, a half a dozen lines from Jimmy Kimmel as opposed to Michael.
Okay, that's amazing. That's amazing. Like the Jimmy Kimmel did
Yeah.
ADR for Michael Madsen. That's incredible. That's a fantastic story.
You are now leaving the PM Entertainment Podcast.